So we the basic idea for this project was that at the time we designed this, which was kind of this most of the design work and being in the field was late last year. Um, at that time, there was very little information about what was going on in New Zealand primary schools, and not that much about what was going on in primary schools globally. So we thought we'd go out and take a look. That was the basic kernel of an idea that led to this project, and in particular, so we wanted to hear from teachers and, if possible, their students about what was actually happening in primary school classrooms. We focused on older primary school teachers or the teachers of older students, so years 5 through 8. And we most wanted data from those who were heavily engaged with generative AI, who were actively out there experimenting. And for that reason, we used an open design and advertised on social media and through teacher groups. So just to be clear, this was not a nationally representative picture for a couple of reasons. One is that we wanted a purposeful focus on early adopters. We were also very cautious about teacher workloads in term 4, and the national survey of primary schools from NZCER was in the field at the same time. And also asked a few calibrating questions that allowed us to gauge how our sample differed from that sample, which is designed to be nationally representative. And that will occasionally mention that through the presentation here. And we were also one reason we chose this design was also that we thought that because this was a specific area interest piece, we thought there was really no way to avoid bias because if we had tried to do a representative sampling of schools across Aotearoa, we suspected that we would have had to go through principals in order to do that, and we suspected that we would get highly unequal response from principals who were really engaged themselves and principals who weren't. So for those reasons, that's kind of the background for the teacher survey design. So who responded? We got a pretty pleasant response. We have 266 teachers with usable data, and generally we did not get we did not get very much we did not get very many repeats from the same schools. So there were a couple of schools where we'd have had maybe 2 or 3 responses, but for the most part, there were more than 200 schools that applied, the individual schools that responded. So 65% said they were more interested in AI than their colleagues. And as we go through, we'll talk a little bit about how that 65 differed from everyone else in terms of their response patterns. They were generally representative in terms of ethnicity, gender, and age. So they matched up very well against the national profile of teachers in New Zealand. And the equity index groups facing fewer barriers were more common. So in a 40-40-20 split. And then finally, 79% indicated that they use generative AI tools at least monthly. To put this in context, the national survey asked basically the same question to calibrate at the same time, and for the overall population of primary school teachers, it was about 46%. Both of these numbers are roughly from roughly the same time at the end of last year. AI tools used. So now we'll go through some of our key findings. So AI tools used to support teaching. Basically, what we learned is that everybody uses chatbots, which isn't too surprising, really. But we did ask about image generation and a variety of other categories, and virtually all teachers who use generative AI in any context are using chatbots. Also, there's a lot of them who are using high levels of use of teaching platforms that have some AI features built in, like Twinkle. So we asked primary teachers what they use generative AI to do, and this was heavily lesson planning, designing assessments, which I found a little bit interesting in the primary range, and then personalizing learning, then also research for teaching. So and then from there we go down. Although all of our categories got at least some engagement from the teaching population. Use among greater interest teachers. So high interest teachers are more likely, indicated they are more likely to use generative AI to support lesson planning, personalized learning, designing assessments, writing student reports, and professional development. On the other categories, they didn't differ, but we had a statistically significant difference in these areas. Most tools that were being used when we did our survey were free. So 18% of teachers at that time said that their school provided them with premium versions, and 27% paid for generative AI tools themselves. And most of which were Twinkle, which are Twinkle with its additional AI features and ChatGPT. Um, Many additional mostly free tools were mentioned by teachers in kind of the open portions of the survey. Uh, and this picture raises some data safety and privacy concerns because, in the Silicon Valley aphorism, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And generally, these the data protections and user agreement specify kind of different levels of privacy protections based on whether you're paying for the tools or not. That's not universally true for all tools, but it's frequently true. Let's see. Teacher insights on student use. So 13% said that their schools provide AI tools for students to use. 64% believe that some of their students are using AI, and 15% believed that more than one-third of their students were using AI. So an interesting thing about this that we'll get back to later is that among the students that we sampled, generally students reported higher use than the teachers guessed, which we thought was a pretty interesting result. Greater interest teachers believed in general that more students were using AI. And in as things bore out, and as we'll discuss in a bit, the greater interest teachers generally aligned more with what the students were saying. Teacher insights on student use outside of school. So teachers' beliefs about student school and home use were similar. This conflicts with the student results. So students reported more use outside of school than on schoolwork. Teacher insights on student use. So greater interest teachers are more likely to believe that AI can enhance student learning experiences and also that learners' use of tools has positively impacted student learning outcomes in their classroom. And they're less likely to believe that AI tools could potentially undermine students' ability to develop foundational skills, although they still believe that still 45% of them agreed with that statement. Yeah, it's very, very, very few agreed that my students understand the potential biases and limitations of generative AI tools. So, teaching with AI, greater interest teachers trusted AI generated content more, felt more confident teaching AI use, felt more familiar with AI biases and limitations, more strongly endorsed AI's potential to provide feedback for students, and believed more often that AI saved teachers time without diminishing quality of instruction. Overall, we see the highest agreements overall with AI can save teachers time without diminishing the human aspects of teaching. If we go all the way to the other end of our scale here, we have I feel adequately supported to incorporate AI into my teaching practices. Um, was only a combined 39% strongly agreed or agreed. It's interesting that approximately half, which is roughly three times as many as disagreed, indicated that they encounter problems with AI tools not being customized for Aotearoa, New Zealand. So we asked culturally responsive teaching questions. So most most who responded to these questions, and not everybody saw them. I should be clear about that. We used a lot of branching questions. So if it's clear that you weren't that the question wouldn't be relevant to your particular teaching situation, teachers generally didn't see them. So that's why the counts here are lower. So creating lesson plans. So of those who use generative AI to support culturally responsive teaching, um, we have approximately 40% were creating lesson plans that explore other cultures, um, and creating uh, 32% creating resources that reflect the cultural backgrounds of their students. Similar numbers that created resources that reflect the diverse cultural context of Aotearoa. We also have approximately 20 to 25% who supported their own learning of Te Reo Māori, supported their teaching of Te Reo Māori, or enhanced their understanding of tikanga or Mātauranga Māori. Um, only 30% didn't indicated that they used AI to support culturally responsive teaching, but didn't use any of these categories. So of those who indicated that they um, used generative AI to support their teaching of Te Reo Māori, um, we asked um, we asked a series of follow-up questions. And in general, a majority, 60%, agreed that AI tools that I have used do not always provide accurate information about Te Reo Māori. Um, a considerably higher number than didn't said using AI tools has improved my ability to incorporate Te Reo Māori into my teaching. And then a roughly twice as many disagreed as agreed with I feel confident detecting language inaccuracies in Te Reo Māori. So, I mean, I think there are some concerns there. Policy and training. So, only 8% indicated that their schools had a policy about teachers' use of generative AI, with 27% at that time indicating that they were developing one, but that didn't yet exist. 19% that said that they didn't know. Um, we looked at teachers who responded from the same schools, which were not most teachers, as I mentioned earlier. But it was interesting that in some cases, in our relatively small number of repeat teachers from the same school, we had conflicting answers on this question. So we had situations in which one teacher at a school said they didn't have a policy, and one teacher at a school said they did. So that was kind of not a lot of data behind that, but we thought that was an interesting anecdote from our data set. 14% had a policy on student use, with 21% developing. And at that time, most had not viewed the ministry's website on generative AI. And this is among a set of teachers who were highly engaged with generative AI overall. Future hopes and concerns. So teachers who were more interested in generative AI showed significantly stronger beliefs that AI will enhance student engagement, reduce workloads, and help address diverse learning needs. And were also more interested in broader school-wide adoption, less overwhelmed by the pace of AI development, and less concerned about potential reductions in students' critical thinking skills, though they were still concerned. So, our student survey Uh, our student survey was designed differently. We asked all teachers who participated if they would like to include their classes, and then had a consenting process that they could go through if they wanted to do that. Um, we That process was relatively rigorous, and we ultimately had four schools that did choose to um, participate. Uh, I think that number would have been higher if we had gone through principals. But we were essentially asking teachers to tell us what was going on in their schools, and that was a design choice. But it did mean that anybody who wanted to include their class then had to go to school leadership and discuss the survey. So um, that may have reduced participation somewhat. Um, so from the four schools that we have data from the four schools that we have data, um, these are we analyze these because the context of the schools themselves were quite different. Um, we analyzed these in parallel so that the data from the schools that provided more responses wouldn't swamp the data from the schools that provided less. And because it's actually quite useful, I think, when you see schools in different parts of New Zealand in different socioeconomic contexts, and in some cases, different school character contexts, giving roughly similar patterns of response to these questions. So you can see that most students at all four cases had heard about AI. One important detail about case A is that those are year five students. Cases B through D are all years seven and eight, but case A are younger, which sometimes influences these patterns of responses, we think. So, um, in general, less than half had heard about AI from family or whānau. Instead, roughly a third to a half had heard about AI from school, and then roughly a third, 20% to a third, had heard about AI from friends. And then we see a really stark pattern of difference by age here in heard about AI from internet or social media. That's most kids among the older set, among the year sevens and eights, and only 25% of the ones who were year fives. So, how can we be sure that the kids know what we're talking about when we ask them about generative AI? This was a thing that our design group thought about at some length. And so we gave them a definition because we wanted to make sure, to the extent that we could, that we were all on the same page about what we meant by generative AI. So we also did some limited focus groups to trial some of the survey questions. And it was pretty clear that generative AI was not a universally understood term among older primary school students when we did that. So we provided them with this definition. The rest of this survey is about generative artificial intelligence, smart computer programs that can do things for you, like writing stories, answering your questions, or drawing pictures. And then to reinforce that, we immediately asked them afterwards about specific use cases. Um, and here's how we define those. So we have game and code helpers, chat helpers, music makers, writing fixers, talking to AI like it's a friend, art makers, and then of course none of these. Um, in general, we see the highest rates of use kind of if we sort of average across in the chat helpers. So much like the teachers, but to a lesser degree, their engagement was disproportionately with chatbots. But in comparison, there's a lot more uptake of other things. And we found this kind of interesting, talking to AI like it's a friend. Uh, this this is data as of a year ago, but even among the year fives, we had a 19% response, and that gets up to roughly a third um, among cases B and D. So how often do you use AI apps? Um, so never. This varied quite a bit across schools, but um, three of them were, 40% to 40 or 50%. And then in case C, almost everybody was using generative AI. Note that this was generally more than the teachers predicted. Similar responses between never and I don't use AI tools is reassuring. So we asked this we asked this essentially the same question a little bit differently in this case. So we asked how often you use it, and then we asked where do you use it, and the answer to where do you use it is much more often outside school. Um, but the never and I don't know are highly or almost exactly the same, very similar. So we were quite pleased by that. Made us suspect that our definition was had gotten through. So. Um, what do ākonga use AI to do? So we asked about a number of specific things. We see high levels of drawing pictures or creating art, answering questions for school or fun. This is quite different across cases. Check or fix my writing. Sizable minority in all at all four schools are doing that. To help with games I play, um, that was interestingly quite high among the younger kids. Many of the others are many of the others are lower use situations, but in all cells, so at least some students said that they did those things. Social influence. So this was knowledge of peer use exceeds knowledge of household use in this age group. So um, they knew whether their friends were using AI more often than they knew whether people at their house were. So attitudes about AI and learning. So most students agreed that using AI too much makes it hard to learn. And most agreed that using AI can feel like cheating. And more think AI tools help kids learn than disagree. Although the exact percentages of that vary quite a bit. Um, a general pattern is that you see in many responses is that um, case A and case B through D um, different in terms of their patterns a bit. Uncertainty about the rules. So most kids did not recall an adult telling them whether they could, or sorry, when they could use AI, and most indicated wanting to follow the rules. So we trialed a list experiment. We thought that in some cases students might be hesitant to respond, so we trialed a list experiment. Um, and students were split into two groups and given two identical lists of things that they might sometimes do. One group was also given a target statement. So the target statement we used was, I use AI to help with schoolwork in ways my school might not like. Only one school had enough responses to provide statistical power for this question. Um, but that one school was statistically significant. Several of the others were suggestive, but we didn't have enough student responses um, to be able to prove statistical to be able to say that we have statistically significant results. But the one that was appropriately powered was statistically significant. So there's two ways to interpret this, but we believe that the most likely, in combination with the earlier data, is that there's considerable student uncertainty about what they're actually allowed to use AI to do at school. So we suspect that this is not really a story about um, students using AI deliberately in ways that subvert their learning or something, but um, instead about it reflect the fact that the students just didn't know what the rules were a lot of the time. So generally, there's a similar picture of student thinking about AI across four unrelated schools. Um, and one of the big takeaways we had was that there's just a gap between the level of interest that students have and the support that they have. Our conclusions from the original report were that premium tools for teachers and maybe for students would be very good ideas. Um, that this needs to be adaptive and non-specific as the best tools will change, and it's important that teachers are aware of what premium tools can do. Um, to an extent, if teachers are going to use generative AI to support their teaching, it makes sense for them to be using the best models that they realistically can be using, just because the quality will be likely higher. Um, Ministry supported policy development and expectations for schools, we recommended. Professional development for teachers, supporting their own use and for teaching AI to students. Iterative inclusion of AI criticality in the curriculum, ideally starting early. So, you know, if many students are learning about generative AI during their primary school years, we feel like it's important to be teaching them AI criticality at an early age so that they can think through what these tools are, what they're not, where risks might lie, and so that they have realistic ideas of what it is that they're in fact engaging with, and also in as the world kind of develops and more people are using these tools around them, it's good for students to understand, even if they're not using generative AI themselves, what all the fuss is about, so to speak. Um, and then work with existing tool makers to create customized content for the Aotearoa New Zealand context. Um, so we also think it's a great idea in some cases for there to be, you know, we're certainly certainly think the idea of platforms that are based in New Zealand is fantastic, but because we have tools like Gemini and ChatGPT dominating to the extent that we can, it makes sense to engage with those tool makers um, to improve the content that exists for New Zealand. And then look to peer countries for framework and policy examples we recommended. And we gave some examples of that in the report, in particular calling out the United Kingdom and Australia. And then not acting risks creating shadow practice, privacy failures, and possibly exacerbating inequalities. So things have developed in the 6 months now since this report was released. Um, the Ministry of Education has sharpened expectations around generative AI. So they've reissued and extended their original generative AI guidance for schools and now explicitly expect AI use to be addressed in school assessment policies and shared with staff and to be shared with staff. Um, this largely affects secondary schools, not primary, but still, I think we think this is a great development. NZQA has refreshed the acceptable use of AI guidance and clarified when AI support is and isn't allowed in assessment and stresses transparency and school policy alignment. Again, this isn't about primary schools, but it is a good development. Um, Cross-government signals now point directly at schooling. So we have government guidance on AI agents for educators, privacy, tetriti, and governance. And then we also have national AI strategy and the MBIE responsible AI guidance named education as an area needing a dedicated framework. So we hope more good things are coming. AI has also changed. So this isn't specifically about policy, but yeah, OpenAI now allows limited use of thinking and deep research functions for free accounts. So even for those using who aren't paying for premium AI, if at least in the context of OpenAI's products, they have options. They have access to better choices, better models. And then in addition to that, Gemini is available as part of many education packages. How this changes the picture. So our survey showed high teacher engagement, limited guidance, and mostly free tools in late 2024. Since then, policy expectations have partially caught up, especially around assessment and responsible use. Access in schools may have partially shifted from personal source tools to built-in AI in Google and Microsoft, I think mostly Google. And then support resources have improved, but are still optional and unevenly used. Gaps between our findings and the national response so far, although, as we say, it's only been 6 months. Primary specific guidance is still minimal. National guidance is mostly system-wide and assessment focused. Policy doesn't equate to practice, especially for students. So the expectations may have shifted, but many ākonga in our data set had never had reported never having an explicit conversation about when it was okay to use AI or what the rules were at their school. So I imagine that's developed since then, but I would be very surprised, particularly in the primary school context, if even half of students were at this point hearing guidance from their schools. This is likely even more true at primary schools than secondary, which is basically what I just said. Um, PLD and resourcing lag behind uptake. Equity and safety concerns remain unresolved. And there's little, and I think this is really, really important, little evidence yet on what actually works for primary AI use. So there's still very limited research and evaluation of safe, effective, culturally responsive AI practice in primary classrooms. We definitely have a world in which there's a lot of use going on and not so much use, and not so much that we really understand about that use. And I think there really is a need for more research. Kia ora koutou. Let's get to it.